Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later we're going to talk about, well, tax increment financing, urban renewal stuff, important stuff that you don't know about yet. But first, a friend of mine, Jeff Hunt, who just took the ship at Centennial Institute.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Sucker.
we have the same father, right?
Actually, let's talk about our same father. So yeah. we're different brothers from the same father, not mother.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think it's probably the way to put it. And that John Andrews started the Independence Institute 31 years ago.
Wow.
And thanks to his terrible management style, sooner or later it fell to me. But without John Andrews, who started this think tank for conservative free market values, which really spawned a movement across the country. And there's an organization like ours now in just about, actually in every state, and we communicate. He became then a senator here and was president of the Senate, and after that, he started your organization.
We ran for governor in between that.
In between, he did run for governor.
He challenged Roy Romer and had the Republican nominee for that. But yeah, he started us. We're 7 years old, so we're your little kid brother. But
don't you forget it.
Yeah. John Andrews really is the kind of Johnny Appleseed of conservative think tanks. He's started 5 of them all over the country, and they're all still running, including Chavano up at Hillsdale. So
I smell money laundering operation. That's something just not right. He started Chavano, which was Hillsdale College, and then he went down to Texas, and then all right, but this child and this, we're very different brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, we come from the same father. Independence Institute focuses on mostly Colorado issues, free market issues. Some people call us a libertarian think tank, and as long as that's a small L, I'm down with it. We don't touch social issues. We do a lot of coalition building, and in our movement, there are social conservatives or libertarian conservatives, and they meet where I am at the Independence Institute. You don't do that.
Yeah, we dive
do you do?
Directly into the social issues. We're happy in that water. It's warm, comfortable.
It's warm, it's comfortable.
So we are the think tank that's housed at Colorado Christian University. We're not separate from Colorado Christian University. We're under the same 501c3 status. In fact, my office is right across the hall from President Bill Armstrong. So we're very much intertwined into that. In fact, Bill, when he became president, implemented a series of strategic objectives. One of these, this is what we carry around. These are our strategic objectives. But one of them is to impact our culture in support of traditional family values, sanctity of life, compassion for the poor, biblical view of human nature, limited government, personal freedom, free markets, natural law, original intent of the Constitution, and Western civilization. And my job every day is to wake up and implement that strategic objective.
Oh, is that all?
So, yeah, small things.
All right, so while Independence Institute, again, this child of John Andrews, is its own organization, has been for 31 years. Colorado Christian has been around for a long time. 101 years. And we ought to mention Bill Armstrong for those people who don't know. Bill Armstrong is one of the powerhouses in Colorado politics, former United States Senator. He's been, I used to call him the Don, because he had this way of, when there were 2 Republicans running for the same office, he had this way of saying, I tell you what, Jeff, why don't you not run this year? And Bob, why don't you run this year? And I'll help you out next year. And they would do this, and all that infighting would stop. A little different than what we have today. But he's taken CCU to new heights. I mean, it's an incredible organization.
It's exploding, yeah.
It's a little on the Jesus-y side, what I've noticed.
As Bill says, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And then he says, you've probably heard it more times than you've heard it on broadcast television in the last 2 years.
But Centennial is still a policy organization, and you get involved in policy issues.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yes, exactly. Well, a great example is Monday we're going to have a policy discussion on doctor-assisted suicide, which came up in the state legislature this year and is going to likely be on a ballot initiative this fall. So we're going to have representatives from our position, which is we're opposed to it, we're going to be discussing that. Mike Norton has created a white paper that dives into this issue. We've passed it out to different legislators. So we're happy to take on these social issues from marriage, life, life of the most vulnerable with the end-of-life issues, as well as in May we're going to have a policy discussion on U.S.-China relations. So we're bringing in an expert from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy. He's going to come in and do a briefing and a public event on U.S.-China relations. So we cover the full gamut, but we're very happy to tackle a lot of those social issues.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because the overlap between my world and your world is remarkably sizable.
Yeah.
We both organizations work strongly for free market principles, government transparency, lower taxation. Yeah. We don't get involved in social issues. And I myself am very libertarian leaning, even though we don't touch those issues. You know, on the right to die issue, I find myself on a different course than you guys. But it's almost a microcosm of the center-right coalition and the problem we have, which is on these few issues, we're so diametrically opposed. Sometimes we break apart on the 95% of the stuff we agree on.
That's absolutely unfortunate. I'm a big practicer of co-belligerence. So, John, you've done a really good job.
Practicer of belligerence?
Co-belligerence, which is the notion that even if you disagree on the 5%, focus on the 95% and tackle those issues. One of our kind of patron saints at the Centennial Institute is William Wilberforce, and he really pioneered this worldview of being able to partner to move the agenda forward on the things that you have common ground on. And
now the left does this masterfully. We don't do this masterfully. The left is able to get trial lawyers and public sector unions and then private sector unions and enviros, all that have very different things going on to work, because they know when government grows, they all do better. But at some points, the union wants the pipeline, the enviro wackies don't want the pipeline, and it starts blowing up the coalition. Why is it that their coalition holds together so well? Ours doesn't.
Well, great question. I think, well, two things. One is we tend to be very principle-oriented. So we have principles that we care very deeply about. We're willing to fight on those, and they're core to who we are. The left is kind of a gathering of people with different agendas, but they don't necessarily share similar principles. And so I don't think they're as principle-driven as the right is. They're kind of more agenda-driven as far as, you know, what can we get for unions, what can we get for the environment, as opposed to those types of things.
They're also much more incremental, in that we've got folks who are, you know, this is it, and I'm not going to get halfway there. I'm not going to get a tenth of the way there. I'm not going to get 0.5% there. Whereas I think the political pragmatists say, this gets us a little bit there. Yeah. We'll do it. Yeah. From your point of view, I've heard, again, we don't do life issues, but there are anti-abortion folks who will not support delays on abortion or waiting periods or requirements for sonograms, because by putting on those restrictions, you are giving tacit approval of it. And therefore, they don't move anywhere, and so they have personhood, and they never move the needle.
Yeah,
am I right on this?
Well, the great example of this is how William Wilberforce again fought against slavery, right? So Wilberforce was one of the great people to end the slave trade in London, but he had to deal with people that were arguing right away for emancipation. Right, so the freeing of all the slaves. And that was a core group within the abolition movement that wanted to just free the slaves immediately. But they had to end the slave trade first. They had to get to abolition before they could get to emancipation. Similarly, with the life issue, you have a lot of different groups, some that are arguing for absolute end of abortion right now, and they're an important contingency within the family that's fighting these issues. But at the same time, I think what I would recommend that they look at is how you do that incrementally. And Wilberforce was able to end the slave trade by doing laws similar to what they've done with these like hospital admitting privileges, where you have to do it with little laws over time, and you're able to move society towards ultimately what you're trying to achieve.
You're willing to admit things like saying that abortion clinics have to have hospital admitting privileges. Are you willing to admit that's more about ending abortion than it is about safety in an abortion clinic?
Oh yeah, I mean, the groups that are doing that are pro-life groups like Americans United for Life, for instance. And so they have an end goal, which is ending abortion. But I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get it there incrementally and protect these the women that are going through these procedures. But the end game is to end abortion. So
help me, and this is purely personal.
Yeah.
The issue that I often find myself debating with social conservatives is that I think social conservatives are right on a whole host of issues, but they're wrong in the way they use coercive power of government to make that happen. You're going to be talking about end of life. You know, one of God's given gifts is free will. And so with free will, people should be able to decide this and hopefully make a virtuous choice that fits them. And I would think that your side would be convincing them that to end their own life is a bad idea. But in fact, what your side wants to do is use the coercive power of government to make sure they don't even have that option. And this is where I find that, you know, it's one thing, you know, when the left says, I don't want you to use an incandescent light bulb. I'm going to convince you not to use that bulb. Yeah. All right, fine. But when they use the coercive power of government to outlaw my incandescent light bulb, we go, what? It must not be a good position if you can't convince me of it. Yeah. So where does free will fall into this for social conservatives?
Yeah, a few great questions, John, and it gets into a few issues. One is we're not libertarians, right? So I see that initially. We think that there's a role for government. It's a proper role for government. But a lot of our concerns, whether it's life for the preborn or the end of life issues, comes down to what that ultimately does for our society. So when you get to end life issues, we don't want people committing suicide. But what I'm more concerned about, why not? Well, because there's a value to their life.
But isn't it their life? Isn't it my life? If I want to take my life, when I'm, you know, the problem, the worry I have is I'm going to get to a point where I want to take my life and I can't. I'm going to need help. Hell, I might off myself sooner because of your laws, because I'm worried about getting to that point. Why is it wrong for me to make that? Why is it your business for me to make that call?
Yeah, well, when you look at most end-of-life issues, and we have this in our white papers, it comes down to some type of depression. It's really not pain-driven. It's an emotional type of depression that's driving most of the end-of-life suicides that happen. That's temporary. Depression's not going to last forever. And
telling me a person with a terminal disease who wants to end his life sooner, and that's what this proposal is. That's
different. That's different because there's a few different issues there. One is the kind of emotional driving of wanting to commit suicide because you're depressed or you're going through some type of emotional pain. Then you have the actual physical pain that you're going to go through, and someone doesn't want to endure that. But our bigger concern is not that case. Because you look at every place that they've passed this, it always moves on to a larger issue where insurance companies, and especially Obamacare, are starting to place value on your life, and they start to go, it's cheaper for you to go now than it is to fight that.
So you're worried about a slippery slope.
That's where we get
people
very
People want to get more information. They want to go to your symposium, want to learn about Centennial. Where do they go?
Great. It is centennial.ccu.edu. So again, we're with Colorado Christian University, so we're a subdomain of that, but it's centennial.ccu.edu.
Jeff, congratulations. You got some big shoes to fill.
Thanks, John.
Stay tuned.